General psychological profile, not a biography, not war stories, pure enemy intelligence trying to make sense of a man who rewrites the rules of combat. January 1945. Berlin. Deep inside the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht headquarters, beneath layers of concrete, sits a file-stamped strange geheim, top secret. Officers trained to think in methodical Prussian order are sweating over this folder. They want to understand him. They are terrified. Inside are reconnaissance photos, decoded radio transmissions, handwritten notes. Every page whispers the same question. Is he reckless or something far worse? He doesn't wait for reinforcements. He doesn't follow procedure. He attacks. And he does it in ways no officer could anticipate. From North Africa to Sicily, the file grows thicker, stranger. Initially, he was just another American officer. Cavalry background, aggressive, theatrical. But then the reports change. Suddenly he is everywhere. Commanding, racing ahead, making decisions that defy logic. German intelligence calls him theatrical, unnecessarily risky, a showman trying to imitate Rommel. And then it works. Every time. Units under his command fight like veterans, even when they're green. They attack, maneuver, improvise. Supply lines? He grabs fuel and ammo from the enemy. Fortifications? He bypasses them. Momentum is his weapon. Speed is his armor. And the enemy can't keep up. By July 1943, Sicilian mountains tremble. Messina is the target. Allied forces are supposed to move methodically, slowly, cautiously. He doesn't. Columns race across the island, zigzagging, overtaking expectations, leaving commanders and maps in ruins. German intelligence is baffled. The reports read fanatisch, fanatical, unrelenting, unstoppable, not invincible, unstoppable. This is where it gets interesting. He doesn't just fight the enemy, he fights perception, openly visible, polished helmet, ivory-handled pistols, frontline inspections. Troops love him. They fear him. Morale becomes a weapon. Enemy intelligence becomes obsessed. They track him, analyze him, debate him. August 1943. Field hospitals in Sicily. Soldiers suffering battle fatigue. He slaps 2 of them, calls them cowards, demands they return to the front. Public relations disaster. Eisenhower reprimands privately, shields publicly. Germans noted, he is obsessed with aggression, cannot tolerate weakness, enemy or ally. By 1944, the debate in German reports splits 3 ways. Some dismiss him as a lucky showman. Some fear he will overextend and fail. The smallest group? Terrified. They recognize a Fingerspitzengefühl, an instinct for war no manual teaches, a general who attacks faster than you can react, the kind who makes momentum itself a weapon. June 6, 1944. D-Day. He isn't in Normandy. He is in England, commanding a phantom army. Operation Fortitude. Fake divisions, dummy tanks, radio transmissions. Germans believe he will be at Calais. He isn't. The real invasion succeeds. Weeks later, August, he finally hits France. Third Army unleashed. German defensive lines crumble. Towns fall before they even know they're under attack. Supply networks collapse. Communications vanish. Chaos, absolute chaos. And German officers note a bitter truth. He is not reckless. He is a method in madness. Aggression is strategy, momentum as weapon, speed as philosophy. Everything Germans believed about warfare is questioned. Every plan must now account for him. And yet he's still held back by politics, by coalition needs, by Eisenhower's careful planning. Imagine what he could do if unchained. If you're still watching, hit that like button. It helps history reach more people. Subscribe for full deep dives into the intelligence, the tactics, the stories they never taught you in school. Drop a comment. Do you think the Germans ever really understood him, or were they just chasing shadows? This is the first glimpse. The enemy feared him. The Allies used him, and the file, thick with intelligence, foreshadows what is coming. A commander who makes chaos work for him, who bends rules, rewrites tactics, and becomes unstoppable without anyone realizing it until it's too late. Patton's Third Army moved through France in August 1944 like a force of nature. German intelligence officers tracked every column, every tank, every convoy, and yet they could not anticipate the pattern. They called it chaos. They called it reckless. But the reality was far more precise. Patton understood momentum as a weapon. Speed was his artillery, aggression his logistics. The breakout from Normandy had left German divisions scattered and disoriented. Patton's units advanced so quickly that entire towns reported Americans appearing before German commanders could organize defenses. Reconnaissance reports noted armored columns striking 20, 30, sometimes 40 miles in a single day. Roads that should have taken hours to secure were crossed in minutes. Supply lines stretched thin, yet Third Army adapted. Fuel, ammunition, food, all captured from German depots or redistributed from other units, kept the Army moving. By early August 1944, Patton was near Avranches, a key junction connecting the Brittany Peninsula and the road east toward Paris. Here, the Third Army faced its first real logistical test. The American forces needed bridges intact, towns cleared, and roads passable for artillery and tanks. Local civilians reported convoys moving at a speed that seemed impossible. Engineers repaired blown bridges overnight. Infantry cleared villages with surgical precision. German rearguard actions were neutralized, bypassed, or enveloped. Patton's approach violated every principle the Wehrmacht relied on. Defensive lines were ignored, strong points bypassed, flanks exposed. Yet every bypass created opportunities. Enemy units attempting counterattacks found themselves surrounded by columns they never saw coming. German officers wrote reports expressing confusion. The Americans do not stop. They do not consolidate. They overwhelm before we can respond. By late August, the phrase "on-off halt bar," unstoppable, began appearing repeatedly in internal assessments. Meanwhile, German morale collapsed. Veteran officers recognized the pattern. Speed and aggression shattered their carefully constructed defensive doctrine. The Third Army did not wait for reinforcements. They improvised, using captured supplies, commandeered vehicles, even local civilian resources. Communication networks failed, and German commands struggled to adapt. Reports described entire divisions as encircled or bypassed, unable to regroup in time. In parallel, Patton's staff orchestrated coordination with air support, artillery units, and follow-on infantry divisions. Aircraft struck rearguards, tanks cleared roads, and supply units kept pace despite stretched lines. The operation resembled a well-rehearsed dance of destruction, yet it was improvised at every step. Patton encouraged initiative down to the company and platoon level. Subordinates were rewarded for boldness, punished for hesitation. This decentralized decision-making kept the Army fluid and unpredictable. By mid-August 1944, the Third Army had crossed the Loire River, heading toward Chartres and Somme. French civilians reported seeing American tanks roll through their towns with astonishing speed. German intelligence analysts could only document what they observed, unable to predict where Patton would strike next. One report called the American advance fanatical, but it was more than that. It was methodical chaos, disciplined unpredictability. The speed of movement also created political complications. Patton's army arrived in towns ahead of French resistance forces, ahead of other Allied units, sometimes creating friction over liberation claims. Yet this too was leveraged strategically. By controlling the roads, the rail lines, and the approaches to key cities, Patton's army became the operational backbone of liberation. The Germans may have thought the Americans were lucky, reckless, or overextended, but the truth was deliberate mastery of momentum. By late August 1944, German reports showed a startling shift. The early dismissive tones, cowboy general, showman, risk-taker, vanished. Patton was now recognized as a primary threat. Reports outlined his tactics, enveloping movements, bypassing fortifications, using speed to isolate enemy units. Relentless pursuit. Yet analysts also noted a growing vulnerability. Fuel shortages and extended supply lines could stall the army at any moment. For the first time, German officers acknowledged that while unstoppable in appearance, the Third Army was constrained by logistical realities. Then came the approach to Paris. German intelligence monitored French and American troop movements, trying to predict whether the city would be defended, bypassed, or encircled. Patton's orders were simple: maintain speed, support the main effort, and keep the enemy off balance. Civilians reported columns of tanks rolling toward the Seine, artillery positioned for rapid support, infantry moving in waves that seemed inexhaustible. Allied air units struck German positions, yet the Third Army advanced regardless. By August 25, 1944, the Third Army had positioned itself to support liberation without slowing French forces claiming the symbolic victory. German reports described American logistics dominating the area. Roads cleared, bridges intact, artillery in place. Patton had not only moved faster than the enemy could react, he had created the conditions for political control without firing a shot. This phase of the campaign taught German intelligence an unshakable lesson. Patton's method was unstoppable momentum combined with psychological dominance. Recklessness, perhaps in appearance. Calculated destruction? Absolutely. By late August, the Wehrmacht understood that wherever Patton was, disaster followed. Swiftly, unpredictably, and with overwhelming force. Patton Battle of the Bulge began in December 1944, when the Germans launched their last major offensive in the West, a surprise attack through the Ardennes forest. From the start, intelligence officers knew this was dangerous, but even they underestimated how quickly Patton could react. On December 16, 1944, German forces pushed deep into American lines, splitting units, isolating towns, and creating a bulge in the front. Communication chaos spread. Supply depots were threatened. American commanders faced confusion and panic. The situation seemed desperate. Bastogne, defended by the 101st Airborne, was surrounded. German planners assumed it would take weeks for a relief force to arrive. Patton, at a meeting with Eisenhower, received orders to halt current operations and pivot north to relieve Bastogne. Conventional wisdom said this was impossible. Entire corps had to reorient 90 degrees, march through snow, ice, and winter terrain, coordinate with depleted divisions, and maintain offensive momentum. Eisenhower thought he was exaggerating. Patton said he could do it in 3 days. He wasn't joking. By December 19, 1944, the Third Army began its northward march. Columns of tanks, trucks, and infantry cut through the frozen Ardennes. Engineers repaired bridges overnight. Supply units improvised fuel and ammunition. Infantry advanced relentlessly, bypassing German strong points that could have slowed them. Patton understood that speed was a weapon, momentum a force multiplier. Every hour of delay could cost Bastogne. German intelligence tracked the movement, reporting astonishment. They had predicted a 4 to 5 day response. Patton did it in 3. Intercepted communications described American units striking southern German flanks, cutting off reinforcements, and destabilizing enemy positions. Reports repeatedly used the term schnell, fast, but also acknowledged coordination and operational genius. Chaos for Germans, order for Patton. By December 22, 1944, elements of the Third Army engaged German forces south of Bastogne. Encircled American units now had a lifeline. The 101st Airborne could breathe. Supply routes reopened. German officers noted the astonishing efficiency. Tanks in towns they thought secure, infantry in positions previously deemed inaccessible, artillery providing support at exactly the right time. Patton's forces did not wait. They attacked through exhaustion, snow, and resistance. Patton's aggressive philosophy dominated every report. German analysts described it as relentless, unorthodox, and unnerving. Unlike traditional generals who paused after setbacks, Patton reinforced, improvised, and pressed forward. If a route was blocked, he found a new path or broke through it. Supply shortages, scavenged and moved on, retreat, unthinkable. His operational method turned chaos into a weapon. Psychologically, Patton's approach had an impact far beyond tactics. Morale among American troops soared. Witnesses reported soldiers inspired by the knowledge that their commander would push through any obstacle. German soldiers faced an enemy who advanced with unstoppable energy. Fear became a multiplier for American success. Intelligence summaries acknowledged it. The Third Army was not invincible, but it was unstoppable. By late December 1944, the Bulge collapsed. German objectives failed. Antwerp remained in Allied hands. Encircled units were relieved. Patton had achieved in days what many believed impossible. Intelligence officers were forced to revise their profiles, removing doubt and skepticism. Patton was no longer a gamble. He was a primary operational threat, a force reshaping the battlefield with speed, aggression, and tactical audacity. Beyond the battlefield, German reports noted patterns in Patton's behavior. He prioritized bold action over caution, speed over consolidation, initiative over procedure. He used momentum to exploit enemy indecision. Analysts realized that psychological impact on both sides, fear, morale, confusion, was as integral to his strategy as tanks and artillery. Patton's personal drive for glory amplified this effect. He was fighting not just the enemy, but history itself, shaping legacy with every decision. By January 1945, reports reflected a grim conclusion. Conventional tactics could not stop Patton. Fuel shortages, harsh winter, and logistical limits were the only constraints. Yet within those limits, he had mastered operational tempo, turning obstacles into advantages. German officers had known his strengths, followed his movements, predicted his actions, but none of it mattered. Knowledge alone could not counter genius in motion. The Battle of the Bulge cemented Patton's reputation as a commander of extraordinary speed, daring, and adaptability. His Third Army proved that momentum could become a weapon, that psychological dominance could break armies, and that the combination of planning and audacity could reshape the front lines of Europe. And while German intelligence would continue analyzing his every move, the lessons were clear. Underestimating Patton meant defeat. Underestimating his philosophy, even more so. In the frozen forests of the Ardennes, the Third Army had rewritten the rules of modern warfare. Patton's final campaign Germany began in early 1945, as the Third Army crossed the Rhine and entered the heart of Germany. The Wehrmacht was collapsing. Supply lines were shattered. Fuel, ammunition, and food were scarce. Cities had fallen. Entire divisions existed only on paper. Patton's approach now meant minimal organized resistance. But the challenge was not the enemy. It was maintaining momentum while navigating political and logistical limits. By January 2, 1945, German intelligence was still tracking his movements. Every intercepted report, every prisoner interrogation, every radio message fed the file labeled Strange Geheim, Top Secret. Officers described Patton's army as an unstoppable machine, not because it was invincible. Tanks broke, trucks stalled, soldiers froze in winter, but because Patton refused to pause. He improvised, scavenged, redirected units, and pressed forward relentlessly. The Third Army captured city after city: Cologne, Koblenz, Mainz. Infantry and armor advanced in tandem, bypassing strong points, cutting off retreating German forces. Patton understood that speed forced the enemy to make mistakes. Delays allowed regrouping. Hesitation gave the Germans time to fortify. Every day of relentless advance was a psychological and operational hammer. Reports from German commanders began using the term unaufhaltsam, unstoppable. It was no longer a warning, it was a statement of fact. Patton's tactics remained unorthodox. Supply shortages forced innovation. Tanks ran on captured fuel. Infantry lived off local resources. Engineers repaired bridges under fire. Communications officers rerouted messages in real time. Every obstacle became part of the attack, every setback a spur to move faster. From the German perspective, the battlefield was in constant flux. Nothing was predictable. Patton's presence amplified confusion. His army moved faster than enemy reports could track, and faster than the Wehrmacht could respond. Political constraints were the only brakes. Eisenhower had to manage coalition priorities, ensure Montgomery's forces were not sidelined, and coordinate with Bradley. Patton would have preferred complete freedom, unlimited fuel, unlimited authority. Analysts noted this in the file. With unchecked power, Patton could have overrun entire regions before German units even realized he was there. But Allied strategy required moderation. Patton adapted, using every inch of operational flexibility granted to him. By February 1945, the Third Army reached the Rhine's eastern banks. Cities along the way were captured, German forces routed or surrendered. Patton's troops crossed rivers, secured bridges, and advanced through winter terrain with unmatched speed. Each day brought new intelligence updates for German officers, each report more frustrated than the last. They knew Patton's style: aggressive, fast, unpredictable. They knew his psychology, driven by glory, momentum, and initiative. But knowing him did not help. There were no resources to counter him. One recurring theme in German assessments was Patton's mastery of morale. Soldiers idolized him. His theatrical persona, polished uniform, pistols, and visible presence inspired fanatical loyalty. Morale became a tactical weapon. Enemy observers noted that American troops fought harder, moved faster, and took greater risks simply because their commander embodied aggression. Fear and admiration amplified operational effectiveness. Patton had turned his personality into a battlefield advantage. By March 1945, the Third Army had penetrated deep into southern Germany. German units, exhausted and disorganized, could no longer mount coordinated defense. Supply lines were fragmented. Headquarters were abandoned or destroyed. Patton exploited every weakness. Encirclements, rapid advances, and surprise maneuvers destroyed what remained of German cohesion. The war, from the perspective of intelligence officers, was being fought on Patton's terms. Yet the file noted something crucial. Despite his genius, Patton remained constrained by politics. Eisenhower, coalition strategy, and logistical limits always imposed boundaries. If unrestricted, his Third Army could have moved even faster, potentially ending the war sooner. Analysts recorded this, highlighting a tension between operational genius and political necessity. Patton's aggression was a double-edged sword, devastating to the enemy, but potentially hazardous without oversight. By April 1945, the Third Army reached the Czech border. German forces surrendered in large numbers. German intelligence files, once filled with speculation and debate, had transformed into historical records. Patton's strengths, speed, aggression, morale, psychological warfare were fully documented. Weaknesses, logistical dependence, political constraints, emotional volatility, were noted but irrelevant in practice. Knowledge could not stop him. The final pages of the strange Geheim file reflected a sobering truth. Patton was more than a general. He was a phenomenon, a force that reshaped modern warfare, a commander whose psychology, charisma, and audacity turned conventional strategy upside down. German officers who studied him knew his methods, predicted his moves, and yet could not prevent the outcomes. By May 8, 1945, the war in Europe ended. Patton's Third Army had played a decisive role in the final collapse of the Wehrmacht. The intelligence file had served its purpose. The enemy had observed, analyzed, and acknowledged him. But it was too late. Fear and respect had already influenced the battlefield. Patton's legacy, as documented by the Germans, was a combination of tactical brilliance, psychological insight, and relentless aggression. He understood that warfare was not just logistics and firepower, it was speed, initiative, and the manipulation of morale. The final lesson of the strange Geheim file: being known by your enemy is powerful, but being unstoppable is fatal. And while this chapter closes, the story of Patton's audacity echoes. His methods shaped the closing months of the war, influenced Allied strategy, and left a template for modern armored warfare. For viewers hungry for the next story of strategic genius and battlefield audacity, check out our deep dive on Eisenhower's deception operations and the D-Day misdirection, where strategy, cunning, and speed collided to redefine World War II.